Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of The Visible Workplace. We're going to drop into an interesting topic, and it involves modern project management systems. Because you might be thinking, hey, Tom, we've already got a way to see the work. We've already got a way to do project management. Like there are these big companies that have invested heavily into making project management better. And we're looking at Trello and Jira or ClickUp and Asana and Monday, Infinity. There's something like, I think when I went through and counted them up, there's around like 43, 44 different project management softwares. And then I could find maybe 7 or 8 different process management software. And these tools are incredibly powerful, but there is a problem. And that problem is subtle. These tools, certainly the ones that are designed like a spreadsheet, kind of like Excel. So we're talking particularly about Asana, ClickUp, Monday, and over on the SOP side, things like Notion or Manifestly. Now, Notion and Airtable, of course, if you're familiar with these, then they're very powerful. They can do lots of different things. But that's the problem, that these softwares allow you to do so many things. They're kind of like drag and drop Excel, that it makes it very pretty, very nice to click. You can have drop downs, you can have links, you can have all these cool things. But the downside is that people use them to do work. Now that sounds ridiculous. You're like, what did you expect? Of course they're going to do work, but I want you to consider that perhaps using them as Excel should be done with an awareness that we're using them as Excel. Instead of, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is, should we be using them to track our work? So on one side, we've got these very capable, amazing software that allows us to do vast numbers of things. But in that comes a power to create all sorts of different designs. And that might be awesome, but if you're trying to run a team, if you're trying to have a consistent method of tracking what's going on in a business, which might be helpful because of several factors. But let's say that you were doing that, and then you allow these very powerful software that can do so many things, that the risk is you end up with a different design for doing work for every area and every part of your business. And that might be okay. The person on that job knows what they're doing and they're very competent and they can explain it and say, hey, look, here's this column for this and this over here does that. And when this happens, we move this. Can you see the problem though? What about if they're sick? What about if they get headhunted? What about if you, as the business owner, want to know what's going on? And you just have to assume that it's all there, all the information's there, because it's a very independent design. And it might be wonderful, and it might even do the work. But if the purpose of projects and project management is to track the work and see what's going on, and see how we can do it with the instructions and see what the results are, then having a different design for every part of the business has a downside. It means that we're very dependent on that person who designed it and maintains it and looks after it to continue to do that. But if they quit or if they get headhunted, or even if you fire them and get rid of them, now you've got a problem. They know how that works. And it's not to say that they do not have their place. These software really are incredible, but if we're using it to track and every design is different, then you're vulnerable. On the other side, if we look at the possibility that the design is consistent for tracking the work, then you've got an advantage. One, it's very quick to train people. It's like, hey, this is how we do things around here. And everybody in the business knows the design. So if there's somebody away, then they can step in, but they can also train others very quickly. The entire business runs on that same design. Now, you've got to choose well. If you choose a poor design, then that is going to have a whole host of problems. You're like, geez, great, we've solved one problem. Everybody knows how to do this thing, except it doesn't work. Or there might be limitations. You see, there is a very consistent design that many people know that's not just in one business, but it's in many, many businesses, and that is Kanban. And so typically this will be set up with a to-do, doing, and done. A simple 3-column design that allows you to move work out of the to-do into the doing and over to the done. And you might see more advanced versions of this where there's columns for this and that, but as it moves away from that simple 3-column design, then the knowledge of how it works also goes down. That somebody else has to work out what those extra columns are, but the actual design itself is very powerful. That it's a consistent design, and it does what it's meant to do. It tracks work really well. It allows you to see what the work is, and it allows you to see what's being done now, and it allows you to see what's completed. And you can glance, and you could use this across all the areas of your business and come to it and say, hey, what's going on? And they bring up their Kanban, and off they go. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is it, this is it, this is it. The difficulty that you've got with Kanban is twofold. One is if things change. If things change, then it's very difficult to alert people that something's changed. They're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over. It's got no instructions. It's got no capacity to say, hey, this is how you do this thing that you're doing. And for that, you need another software, SOP software. But people traditionally don't use the instructions. It's usually whether it is the equivalent of being stored on the shelves and not used, or in the digital version, it's on some folder somewhere that again doesn't get used. This is a very common thing, even though the work's getting done. And so if there is a change, if there is something that has to be updated, something that has to be done differently, then Kanban struggles with this. It was designed in Toyota, and Toyota has an advantage, and that is that it's an assembly line. Things don't change very often on an assembly line. Otherwise, what happens? Well, you'll get a different outcome at the end. If you change the color of the door, let's say that you're building a red car because they go faster, and you put in a black door because whatever, the door was black, you're going to end up not with a red car, you're going to end up with a red car with a black door. And so things don't change very often in an assembly line. But in a modern digital workplace, things change all the time. Amazon changes, Facebook changes, new algorithm, do it this way, do it that way, change, change, change. Let alone if you've got a problem with how things are being done and you need to get people to change behavior, this is very difficult. There is no way to force people to look at the instructions with Kanban. It's just move it along, 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 move it along. Very good for things that don't change. But if you're in an environment that changes, then you somehow have to get people and make it easy enough for them to use the SOP software as well, because that's going to tell you what to do, how to do it, which templates to use, where things are stored. All of that information is there. And you can argue and say, well, humans are highly adaptable. They can learn these things. And we do. We do. But the problem is when things change, bringing that to the awareness that something has changed and not to use the existing habit. This is a significant challenge. And if you just don't worry about Kanban and don't worry about project management and just go over to SOPs and go, you know what, we need to make sure that everything's done. It's very advantageous. And in some businesses, it's absolutely required. They need to prove that things got done. Tick, 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 tick. But usually, there's no time frames. There's no status of what's being worked on, just a tick box. And if we come to where this came from, or at least one of the very clear examples, we look at eMyth. And there's a hotel that Michael Gerber goes to, and the hotel is extremely well run. And he wonders why this is, and he finds out that there's a checklist of things that have to be done. Make the bed, empty the bin, clean the toilet, clean the basin, replace the little, you know those little things, whatever they're called, the little toilet shampoo and conditioner. And all of those things get done and they get ticked off. And this is a SOP process. And the result is very interesting. The result is a ready room, a clean room for the next guests. And everything can be proven that it got done. And when we had a cleaner doing this room 8 times, and they would go along and have a checklist for each of the 8 rooms and tick, 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 tick. This was very effective. But in this example, I want you to realize that, like Toyota, there's something special about that hotel example. Do you know what it is? Well, it is that it is a physical environment. That room is a physical experience for us as humans to go into and do the work. And this makes it a lot easier. I can see the sink. I can see the toilet. I can see the shower. I can see the bed. I can see the bin. Physically there, it's very easy to recognize that work. And then if I combo that with a checklist, I can be sure that everything gets done. But as we move into a digital workplace, the challenges of change and the challenges of not being in a location where we can see things physically make tracking work to be very difficult, particularly if there's work that has to be done over and over and over to a specification, and certain things have to be done. Now, this is, like all of this discussion, got its cases where it's pretty easy. Things that I do every day are not going to be that hard to improve and iterate and get right. But as I come to work that is irregular, that's done on longer time frames, every month, every 3 months, or is triggered by irregular events, and I haven't done it very much, or it's relatively rare, this work is very prone to mistakes if I am relying on me remembering everything. I just went through this experience. We launched the MVP for the software for Magic Boards. And one of the changes in that was to bring it off the back-end servers and put it onto the front end. And this, to me, as the consumer, looked pretty easy. I'm like, well, you just move it and move it, and it's done. But a couple of small details, and tech is all so detailed, as you may know if you're in the tech space, What I didn't know is that you have to move off the test database and move on to the real database, but no one told me. They didn't communicate that to me because it's work that gets done very rarely. It's not the dev. The dev has been wonderful, but on the rarer occasions, it's like, oh, and I was like, hey, this isn't working. What happened to my work? I've lost all my work. Now, oh, no, that was the test database. When we go live, we go on a live database. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But that could have been communicated to me. And I'm like, oh, sweet, okay. And so these irregular events, or if there's work that must be detailed, then having the instructions and having the work makes a difference. And that gets into the magic board design. Magic boards are designed to make it easier to use the instructions than not to. They're also designed to allow for people to get better at the work. They don't have to look at all the details. They just need the reminders and go, oh yeah, that, done. But if there's a change, they need to be alerted to that. It's like, hey, something changed. You can't skip the detail on this because in the detail there was a change. But if the instructions are right there, whether I need them or not, they're available. And it allows me to put things in the right place, to find things quickly, to have links that open to software that I use regularly in the correct place, files come up quickly, and we also have all of the results that we're looking to build all in one place on the same design. Whether it's in marketing, whether it's in advertising, in sales, in fulfillment, whether it's in optics or people or accounting or taxes or insurance and legal or in cash and funding, all of those are running on the same design. And you might wonder, how is it possible that you could have this same design? Well, it's possible because of a fundamental fact, and that is that if I do something, I get a result. If I go on Zoom and press play and speak to the computer, we will get a podcast episode. Do the work, get the result. Do the work, get the results. And so if we put the instructions for doing and we put the results right there, this is why the consistent design works. And beyond that, what else might we want? Well, we might want to know who's responsible. And we might want to know what status it is, just like the Kanban board. Has an item been started? Has it been completed? Is it ready? Are we waiting? Is it scheduled? You see, a button drop down that allows you to select the status allows for a much cleaner experience instead of having 5, 6, 7, 8 columns on a Kanban board. You see, if you've got not started and working on and done, that's great. But how do you deal with things where you're waiting on a client to get back to you, or you're waiting for a bill to be paid, or there's something scheduled in the future? It's not done yet, but it's scheduled and we can see that it's scheduled and we know it's ready. Or ready in itself. Perhaps there's a result where I'm working on something, I'm recording the podcast, and when it's done, I can mark it ready for my team to come in and go, great, we're going to extract the podcast, we're going to extract the audio, we're going to title it, have a data card so that Tom can give us the title and give us the hashtags and the description. And then they can take all of that and upload it to the podcast software and then promote it. And all of those things can be done consistently and they can find where things are. They don't have to remember it. They don't have to search for it Because when we make a copy of the magic board, all of the essential scaffolding that makes the system work is there. And so you can try different designs. There's no doubt about that. But the one that I like is the magic board. And even if I very roughly fill in the processes or not even fill them in at all, if I know what I want to produce, if I know the results that I want, then this gives the fundamental structure. And there could be 2, 3, 5 different ways to get some results. And sometimes there's only one way to get that result. And if I don't follow those instructions, I won't get that result. Just like with the assembly line, if I want a red car, then I better put a red door on, not a black door. Otherwise, I won't get a red car. And this sounds so obvious. And yet, every day, mistakes are being made, errors are being made, things are being forgotten, data's been lost, can't find it, still waiting on. I thought that was. And as a business owner and entrepreneur, you look and you're like, where are you up to? And you can't see, or you can see something, but that software is so powerful that you're not sure how to interpret it. And so you have to trust. You can't know. But with a consistent magic boards design, you can know. I can see exactly where we're up to. I can see what status everything's at. I can be alerted to problems. I can see where we're falling behind and see where we're ahead of schedule. I can look to the past and see how long things took. And we can improve the way we do things. It's much easier to improve the way things are done if we know what we're doing right now. I've seen this extracted on calls. It's like, well, what do you do first? And what do you do next? 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 And there's these 5 processes, likely all with significantly more detail, but nonetheless, the big 5 processes are out. And they're like, well, what does that produce? And they're like, well, it gives me this, this, and this. And boom, we've got our 3 results. The other thing that this consistent design brings is the ability to have confidence that you're going to be able to produce what you want. And that in itself, that certainty to say, you know what, I want a red vehicle. I want a red car. And then your teams or yourself can go and go, well, what would be required? And you could work backwards and say, well, we'd have to add the wheels, and then we'd have to have the axis, and then the framework goes on, and then the main bits and the engine goes in. Or you could work forwards, or you could rough sketch it out. But if you know that there are steps that have to be done, then this gives you a confidence and a certainty that you can specify what you want and know that that can be reproduced. I was in a band, or I am still in a band. And part of that, we would have a friend of mine make chai tea. It's a traditional part of the type of music. It was fascinating. It was fascinating because the chai tea would be different every time. Every time we'd show up, it would be different. And some of them were amazing. Like literally like, oh my goodness, where did this chai tea come from? This is incredible. More please, more of this. And some of them would be too spicy, or some of them would be too sweet or too sour. But my chai walla, my chai tea maker, never wrote the recipes down for any of them. And so we were destined to continually have a new version of chai tea. And this had its place. This had its place. It was a little bit like spinning the roulette wheel. What would we go? Oh, it's a number 31. Oh, next week it's a number 2. Next week it's a number 18. Oh, I like this number 18. Oh, it's beautiful. But his ability to replicate the same tea every week was 0 because nothing was written down. There was no ingredients There was no amount of ingredients. There was no methodology of time or ordering. It was all just done free flow. And yes, there is a place for that. The consequences of messing up the chai tea are pretty small. Like, that one's pretty spicy. Sometimes it made singing difficult, but most of the time it was delicious and it was totally fine. But if you're running a business and you're expecting to deliver results consistently and your clients and customers are expecting consistency, same result, and you don't know how you are getting the results that you're getting, you're in trouble. You're in trouble on a whole host of levels. Not only that you don't know how you're getting the results and it's in your team's head, which makes you vulnerable if that team member's sick or headhunted or quits, but you have no ability to improve and you have no ability to sell. The attractiveness of that business without anything written down, even if it makes exquisite items, it's very difficult to buy and very difficult to sell because all of the methodology is hidden, and that's not very exciting. But for a business where everything's documented, everything can be seen, everything can be improved, and there is a redundancy of work that is possible because everyone's using the same design to track the work. Not do the work, but track the work. This enables a level of confidence that is very hard to replicate when everything's in everyone's head or everybody's using their own designs. So we're going to wrap it up there. Hope you got some value from today. If you want some more information, you can head over to magicboards.io. Magicboards.io and give you the design, how to set these things up, where to put the processes, where to put the results, what columns to have. And you can take that to Asana, take that to ClickUp, take that to Monday and set it up and try it out. See what happens. See what happens. Port across a single system. Start simple. Get some reps. Get some experience. Begin to see that you can find templates quicker, that you can find files quicker. And then from there, expand and check out how does this design perform in bigger tasks. Magicboards.io. If you know people struggling in business with processes and project management, and they're stressed and working way too hard and they're vulnerable to all of the issues that we've discussed here today, then send them over with this podcast. I hope you're having an awesome day. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode as we continue this journey into project management and processes and systems and all things business management. Have an awesome day. Look forward to seeing you next time. See you then. Thanks for joining us at the Visual Workplace. This is a notification that the information and ideas discussed here are general in nature and do not take into account your specific circumstances. You should seek specialist advice for any medical, financial, emotional, mental, or other difficulties that you are facing with appropriate specialists and professionals so that they can apply your specific circumstances and give you the required advice. Thank you for joining us, but this is also a notification that all information is indeed general in nature and not specific for your personal circumstances.